Life is 10% what happens, 90% how you respond to it. It's much easier said than done. Mistakes are going to happen in the game. Turnovers are going to happen. There's never been a perfect game ever played, but it's about focusing on the non-negotiables. What areas can we not make mistakes in, and holding them accountable to that. And then with the attitude, it's like, hey, you may have made a mistake on this end, turned it over, but that ball's coming right back this way. So you can't live in that moment. You got to go on to the next play right there.
Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by the head men's basketball coach at Texas Lutheran University, Austin Falke. Coach Falke was a walk-on at Stephen F. Austin from 2007 to 2010 and a member of 2 championship teams with 1 NIT and 1 NCAA tournament appearance. He's been coaching for 14 years, 3 as a head coach. He spent 3 years as an assistant at Schreiner. As an assistant coach at Texas Lutheran for 8 years, Coach Falke was part of 4 conference championships. In 2019, he was named the NABC Under Armour Top 30 Under 30 Up-and-Coming Young Coaches. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
Are you ready to level up your team's skill development? Well, Bology is here to support you in driving accountability and skill development. The Bology app is more than just tracking. It's a resource for enhancing skills, knowledge, and mindset across your program. Join coaches all across the country using Bology to simplify training and empower your athletes. Let's build consistency, accountability, and skill development together.
Coach, it was fun for me a few weeks ago to get to be on your campus and to walk around and see the facilities. And when you're doing that, especially when you kind of go into the locker room of some gyms, you do get to get a feeling of the culture of that place. And then especially when you get to talk to the head coach like you, and your programs had just such an amazing history with the previous coach that you worked for about 8 years or so.
6 years with Coach Wacker and then 2 years with Jimmy Smith.
Yeah. So you've had some great coaches that you worked for, and now you're taking over and moving that culture forward. So sometimes there's one activity that you can do that maybe solidifies it or takes it to another level. What's one of your favorite culture building activities?
Probably my favorite, and we started this kind of in my first year, but Coach Wacker always kind of did these things usually before games, like gave these nice little talks, and we wanted to kind of branch out on that. So what we did is we have what we call game of life lessons, and it's something that we want to do each week when we start practice and have something different that we talk about that kind of goes beyond the game. A lot of it kind of, goes back to the game and stuff, but, it goes with business, it goes with faith, it goes with, life in general, just to make sure the guys understand that, hey, this is more than a game, our bonding ability, what we want to get out of things. But game of life lessons is a big one. It's something that's usually led by myself, one of my assistants. More importantly, it's really fun when a player wants to do something. We had a couple of those last year, and man, those are when it becomes really powerful, because it's not just coming from us, it's coming from a player's perspective. And I think that can usually speak more to what the guys are going through, and they relate to it a little bit more. And so that's one of my favorite things that we do outside of just, team meals and, hanging out, doing different things. But game of life lessons, I would say, is something that's become my favorite.
How do the players choose which one they want to do? Do they know maybe like the words that are coming up ahead or the themes, and then they get that's the one, like enthusiasm, whatever. That's one I want to tackle. How does that work?
No, I mean, this is all just kind of how you feel and what's on your mind, what's on your heart. And it's the same for us coaches too. Like we don't have a set, hey, we're going to talk about this one day.
It's not like a curriculum that you go through every year. Okay.
Yeah. But I do want to like start typing them out and like just compiling a bunch of them. May make for a great book one day. I don't know.
That's right. It's a great title right there. If that title hasn't been taken already, I'd be surprised. But no, I like the idea of having a plan, but then also maybe going off a feel a little bit. What does your team need? You know your players better than anybody else, and so maybe there's something you've talked about in the past that just isn't as important or necessary for this group. I think having the freedom, almost the same way with your practice plans, the freedom to get to move in and out and choose to stay in one area more. I don't know. I think that's pretty smart.
Yeah, no, we really enjoyed it. I think, our guys really respond to it well. We've had some, what I think are some pretty powerful ones, and some that, feel a little forced at times. You have some of that, but I think the general idea is just to get the guys thinking outside the box. The game is, season is so long, it's such a grind. Things don't always go your way. Let's put things into perspective. So they do a good job. I really love when they want to do them, because it's fun when that happens.
What do you do, though, to make sure that environment happens? Because to me, that's a pretty, I hate safe space, but that's a pretty delicate balance that you have to have when players are sharing or talking, and one that could, with maybe by a sarcastic remark or players snickering, can shut down really quick. Are there any parameters that you kind of make and create that help that environment to happen?
One, by the guys that we have in the locker room. I mean, they're all, really good character guys and really respectful. So a lot of that's just natural. We do have those talks. Hey, if somebody's saying something, make sure you respect it, make sure you understand it. You don't have to agree with everything, but, listen to what someone is saying and have some empathy to what is being said. Like last year, we had a freshman who wasn't playing a whole lot. I mean, he led one, and that's powerful. And I think the guys really respect each other. They're around each other all the time. So, I think they have a good understanding and feel for that stuff. So I think that really, that's not something you can kind of create on your own. That's something that just happens naturally with the group of guys that you have.
When do you do those? Do you have a set time every week that you do it, or do you just try to make it work with the schedule that you have?
So this year will be, like, my goal this year is to have one each week that we're practicing. So ideally at the beginning of the week, so it's kind of a week-long thing, things that we can kind of draw back on, say Thursday's practice, and, we draw back on Monday's talk. Last year, it was a little more kind of the Wednesday, Thursday, kind of leading into a series or into the weekend of games. Sometimes I like doing them on the road at hotels too, just getting
That's a good use of time.
Yeah. Get in the conference room, you got time to spare, maybe you did a scouting report and stuff, and then we have the talk after. We didn't have a set kind of time last year. We just try to do it before the games, but a lot of times you're just thinking about the game. So I think doing it earlier in the week kind of gives you a little more time to sit on what was said and kind of have your own thoughts, and, then you kind of just add to it throughout the week.
I love hearing that a college coach like yourself takes time away from on the floor to do some of these like life lessons, like you say, but these culture items that, man, they definitely will help your team, the chemistry and maybe the product on the floor and how they practice, but it's bigger than basketball. But I've struggled over time of what's the balance between doing these things, but then also getting done all the things that I need to do on the floor. And years ago at Faith, and I actually got this from the former Wheaton football coach. I was listening to a podcast, and in this podcast, he just gets up in front of the mic and he's like, he pulls out this yellow sheet of paper. He's like, I know a lot of people do overhead projectors and all this PowerPoint stuff, but I just have my sheet of paper. And he went through these 12 to 15 characteristics of living a life without regret. And I'm listening to this. I was like, this is amazing to take a team through it. And so I put together my own PowerPoints based on what he said, added some things in. And then once a week on Wednesdays, I would take my guys through the Living Without Regret. But I did like 30 to 45 minutes of this PowerPoint, all good stuff. But looking back in one of the years, we didn't have a lot of success, as far as wins and losses. I don't know I'm not saying the time that I spent with Living Without Regret was the reason, but did I spend too much time? Because on a Wednesday practice, we weren't on the floor very much at all. I did value, and I think the guys enjoyed that stuff, but what's your thought on the balance that you need to have with these types of meetings or culture building activities, but making sure that you do get things done on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're trying to win games. That can't be lost on anyone outside of, the things we're talking about, but we do want to put things into perspective. I balance it out fairly well, I think. We don't take away from what we got to get done. I mean, there's just certain things you got to accomplish, you got to get better at. In our practice planning, we look at those things. So everything is detailed out, what we have to do, how we have to do it, and we don't lose sight of it. When we're doing those talks, hey, our focus is on those talks, but then we get on the court, hey, if we're doing shell drill, our focus is on shell drill, whatever it might be. We got to have that focus on the task at hand. You can't be thinking about something in the past, something in the future, but I think if you put the time into, we're focused on this right here at this moment, these are the things you should be concentrating on, because then if you're able to just focus on that, you're not thinking about other things. So we try to make sure they understand that process.
I think it's a balance. I went too far with it at times where it was 45 minutes of one of these aspects of living without regret, 30 minutes on the floor, and maybe swayed too far. But I think that's rare. I think what happens a lot is the other swing, which is all floor. That stuff's too important. We can't miss any of it. So these ideas of standards and pillars or areas that for growth with our team, man, it's so easy just to push past that. We'll get it next week. And then you don't, without even realizing a month's gone by. And like Phil Beckner said, you've got to worry about coaching the part that's in between their ears. Like, we've got to fight for that space just as much as we fight for their spacing on the floor and those things. Speaking of standards and pillars, does the game of life lessons, do those lead into the standards and pillars of your games or of your team? Are they separate? And how does that work?
Everything relates to our standards. Everything relates to what we're building on. So, for example, two of our primary pillars that we have is attitude. Life is 10% what happens, 90% how you respond to it. It's much easier said than done.
Yes.
But mistakes are going to happen in the game. Turnovers are going to happen. There's never been a perfect game ever played, but it's about, focusing on the non-negotiables. What areas can we not make mistakes in, and holding them accountable to that. And then with the attitude, it's like, hey, you may have made a mistake on this end, turned it over, but that ball's coming right back this way. So you can't live in that moment. You got to go on to the next play right there. So we talk about attitude, ups and downs. It's not just the lows. I mean, it's the highs too. You can't sit there and get a dunk and then be waving your hands up in the air and all of a sudden the ball's going in the other direction. I mean, so you got to have that nice balance. It's not to say that we don't want our guys to be happy or ticked off, because that's emotion. You can have that, but you can't let it bleed over to where you're not doing the next thing that you got to do. So that's a big one for us with attitude. And that kind of bleeds into one of my own philosophies, which is state of mind. It's a nice little poem. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you dare not, you won't. You like to win, but don't think you can. It's almost a sense you won't. Bunch of other lines with that too. But that was something my mom recited to me pretty much after every single game. Just bled into my core. But state of mind is something, it's, power of positive thinking. What are your thoughts? That leads into a lot of other things. The other pillar that we have is approach, how you go about handling your business. And this kind of has some different factors with it, but basically our approach is 1%. If you think you've done enough, do just a little bit more. And that ties into life as well. Hey, if you think you've done enough at your house, do 1% more, do a little bit more, make your wife a little happier, make your kids a little happier, laundry sitting on the floor. Hey, just do it,
If the dishes are full, just get them done without her having to ask.
Exactly. So, I mean, that goes into everything. If you feel like you've studied enough, just do a little bit more, just spend a little bit more time, 5, 10, 15 minutes. I heard somebody talking about, the time of the day. And I think if you took 1% of the day, the hours in the day or something, you get like 14 point something minutes, which is like 15 minutes. So we used to kind of talk about, hey, 1% rule, be 15 minutes early to something, get 15 minutes extra. So that was kind of how we incorporated the 1%. And then also with approach goes with this kind of motto that I really like: good, better, best, never let it rest until your good is your better and your better is your best. So basically everything you're doing, you set goals, you're trying to, have a standard of goals that you meet. If you're able to meet those goals, okay, now, hey, go from good to better, raise the bar a little bit. If you're doing better, then raise it again. Try to always meet your goal, but keep striving for something more. So those are the two big things, attitude and approach, that we really try to get across to our guys, and they do a phenomenal job. I've been really impressed with how our season went last year, just the mentality the guys had, the togetherness they had. That gave me a lot of hope and optimism going into this year.
That's a great point. How even when the wins aren't stacking up the way that we want, how our players are responding, how they're showing up, which is the attitude and the approach from day to day. I think that really gives us as coaches a lot of confidence and hope that we're moving in the right directions. I don't know if players really, if they realize how much impact they have or can have on our attitude and our response. Now, obviously, as the ones in charge and the ones leading the culture, we need to be setting those standards every day. But I like the idea of my players knowing that they affect me. And if we lose, but we have a great attitude throughout the game and none of those big culture breaking moments, and then our approach after of, did we get 1% better? Yeah, I think we did. So the score is irrelevant, fellas, and you see that in them and you feel that. I think that helps us know that we're moving forward instead of what can happen in wins and losses is, without realizing it, maybe we're staying in the same spot, which actually means we're moving backwards.
You might lose a game you shouldn't have lost, but what's your approach going to be? Or you may have won a big game. What's your approach the next day? I mean, you got to be consistent, I think, as much as you possibly can, in those peaks and valleys. How are you managing? How are you approaching each situation? What are you learning from it? And then how are you letting go of it? And then moving on to the next day.
Obviously, the attitude or the mistake response of your own players is really important. But with the ability to recruit and to bring those guys in, how much of that habit are you watching for in school ball when you go to select ball tournaments? Not just the good things that they do, but when something bad, a turnover or a foul is called, their mistake response, how much are you watching that during the spring and summer?
Once, we kind of try to identify guys based on obviously talent level. And then once we're able to kind of figure that out, then we start looking at the other things. How do they handle hard coaching? How do they handle mistakes? What are they doing to be a good teammate? Those are big factors. At our level, we don't always have the ability to, have that much, take that much stock into some things, but we do value those. If we see a guy that's just hanging his head all the time, going to the end of the bench, not high-fiving anyone, probably not a guy that's going to really fit here. That's just the honest truth. Not a guy that would probably fit in most programs, but, we do value not necessarily mistakes, because mistakes happen. They're all trying to get noticed. They're all trying to win games, so there's going to be those moments where they're going to be ticked off. How long do they stay in that? I think is what's more important. Are they staying into it while they're on the bench the whole time, then they go back in and they keep it while they're on the court? Or, they let it go, find a way to move on, listen to the coach, and then get back out there and try to just keep competing?
I think that's the situation that so many of us think about when we talk about mistake response or attitude. You have a player that comes off the floor and they're a little bit upset about what just happened on. And again, it could be their own mistakes, could be officials, could be the fact that they're coming out of the game and they don't agree. In that moment, when do you decide to address the breakdown in attitude or the 90% about how they respond? Do you do it in that moment? Do you choose to give them time? Do you wait later on to do that? And maybe it is depending on the situation, but when do you tend to do it?
So obviously it's something that we address the beginning of practice, start of the season. These are things that we're talking about. They understand the things that will tick me off, the things that just, it's a non-negotiable for me, and it's hard sometimes, I will say, as a head coach, is you got a really talented player, but you have these issues, but you see that the issues are causing other issues, but he's talented. So it's been difficult at times for me to kind of be straight with that. I think as I go into my third year, I'm much more, I know what I expect, what the rules, what the guidelines are, and how we'll handle them. But in those kind of moments, I try to say something to them right there and then, just try to give them a one word, like get over it type thing.
Yeah. Next.
Yeah. Get over it's probably not the best way to phrase it.
Well, get over it. I get that. Like, get past it. Yeah.
And then really from there, like if I'm trying to tell them something and if I get a negative response back, that's when I'm like, okay, I'll turn to my assistant and like, you better handle this, because he's probably not going to be coming back in for a while. So we try to have just those quick little interactions, but again, I can't take my focus off of, when we're in a game, of the other guys that are on the court, and spend my whole time on this other player that's, upset with something, so we try to just have a quick thing, and it's either done and forgotten, or it's okay, you're in the doghouse now. So,
a couple good nuggets there. And I think one is using our assistant coaches in those situations. If you are fortunate enough to have 1, 2, or 3 assistant coaches or more on the bench, instead of you taking all of your time to address that player, ahead of time, have your assistants prepared. And maybe it is like a look at a turn of, hey, you better get him. Maybe it is that, or it's orchestrated ahead. Like to my staff, when you see negative body language, some of the culture breakers that we discuss in our program, make sure that you address that when they come out of the game. But here's another thing, and this is what Mano Watsa, I got from him years ago, the president of PGC. He said, those conversations that you have to have with those players are really important, but we all know how they happen is equally as important. And so what he didn't like, and what I've done before, is culture breaker happens on the floor, they come out. I'm heated, I'm mad, and before they even can walk me, I'm holding them and I'm just letting them have it. They're pissed off, I'm pissed off, and we probably achieve nothing. So Mano said that you need to let them go past you and get water and then have them come back. And I took that from him. So last few years, no matter how I feel about that player or what happened, good or bad, because I want to give almost every player something when they come out. Rarely is it just a fist bump and sit down. And so I'll tell them when they come off, grab water, come back to me. And so it gives me time. Like, I can't be angry right then. It gives me time to calm down. And usually, Coach, by the time it takes them to grab water and come back to me, I'm more composed. They've also had a chance to possibly think about what they've just done. Okay, Coach is going to talk to me about that. I got to be prepared. I just think the less feeling that we can have in those situations, I think the better.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. I mean, we're all just, as humans, very reactive, and that's a great life lesson in itself right there. If something is occurring, take a deep breath, try to talk it through your head just for a moment. Like you said, go get some water, and it just allows you to have that moment of, calming down. Because when you have two people that, this guy's ticked off, you're ticked off, again, like you said, either nothing's going to happen or something worse probably would be likely to happen. And that's not good for...
Coach Bliss used to talk about the ESPN moments. And he would say the ESPN moments, guys, are the ones that when you do something good or you do something bad, that camera is going to fly right to you. Now, at Grapevine Faith Christian School, we do talk about ESPN moments, but there's no cameras here filming our games except for Huddle, but that doesn't zoom in on a player. So, but those ESPN moments are when you do something good, what attitude, what approach do you have after that? And what we try to have them do is, defer to others. Don't celebrate yourself. In fact, we want the other 4 to be celebrating the one that did do something really well. That's an important moment. But also, when that bad thing happens, you've got to pretend that the camera is going right on you. So Coach Bliss, when something bad would happen, he would put his hand over his mouth like this. And anytime you're watching film, if you saw him do this, he knew that the camera was going to be on him, and he didn't want anybody to know what he was saying to them. And it was never good, Coach. So if I come watch you play and all of a sudden I see you doing this with your guys, I'm going to know what you're doing.
Yeah. I'll probably be more like this, like I'm taking a mound visit with the MLB guys. They're just,
gosh dang it. Yeah, like it just, every time he did that, I was like, oh no, get ready. It's coming.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here.
So analytics are a big part of our game now. And I think most coaches are past the point of ignoring them. But how you use them is important. How do analytics, what role do they play in your coaching style?
I mean, they're big. Look, analytics is everything. When in any sport, any aspect of life, there's analytics involved. And I think to just turn away from them would be foolish. I think, going all in on them, I think also could be bad. There's a certain thing that I like to go with instinct a lot too. We might not like a certain shot in a certain area, but if the guy's having a good game, I mean, instinctually, let the guy kind of go in certain moments. But it's, I don't like early long twos. I think that's a lot of coaches now. There's some guys that will have the ability to take them because their percentages and practices and games have shown that. And so they have a little more leeway. You got to understand your role and where you're at in those aspects. But analytics is huge. I probably look at it a lot more on the defensive side than I do the offensive side. But, I mean, the analytics with 3-pointers versus 2-pointers, you're obviously the closer to the basket, the higher percentage. And then the further out, that's why I like long twos. Not a lot of coaches like them because it's a long two, the percentage is lower, and you're going to be better off taking that three. Because if you're equal in that area, the threes are worth more than two. So analytics is huge, particularly we look at it on the defensive side, what we want to take away, where we want to force shots. And so in terms of scouting and practice preparation, and then two is player tendencies. There's certain players, they have tells, what they're going to do. I mean, I can tell what a player is going to try to do every time. I think we were watching film one time on this guy, and, after about the second clip, it was like, he's going to do this baseline spin move every time he catches it right here. And every time, I mean, that's what he did. So we would use that and be like, hey, he's going to do this every time. Let's take it away. Understand you're going to do that. Now, it's one thing to make sure you practice it and talk about how you're going to guard something. It's another thing for the guys to actually execute it in games.
Yeah.
So I think if you're looking at analytics, that's good, but you got to be practicing and repping it pretty religiously.
Yeah, I think if right before the game, 3 minutes before in the locker room, you say, hey, watch out for a spin move. I don't know. Maybe you have a player smart enough, disciplined enough, or a team that can on the fly get that. And at the high school level, that's what I like about tournaments. I think tournaments really do show the IQ of our players because there's very little, if any, prep involved in that. And we are learning on the fly, fellas, of what these guys like to do, what they do well, and how we can attack them. I agree with you. I think the more people learn in different ways, hear it, see it, do it. And the more that we can incorporate all three of those ways using analytics, using film, and I just think that creates smarter players.
Yeah. It also gives you the accountability factor too. Like if you're prepping for a game all week and you've been talking about how you're going to guard this action or guard this player, and then you get to the game and they don't do it, it can be quite frustrating. So it's like, okay, clearly I don't know what you did in the million reps that we did going over this and our talks. And so it just happens. I mean, but that's an accountability thing. So, well, all right, we got to take this guy out. He's not getting it done. And hopefully the other guy will at least guard the guy the way we said to.
Coach, that's a huge point. My involvement with select ball, how little it was this last year, I was amazed at how either myself, other coaches wanted to hold our players accountable for things that we've never talked about. We've never taught. And on the fly, if those mistakes are happening on the floor, but you haven't practiced how to attack a 2-3 zone, you haven't practiced how we're going to play the post or how we're going to guard ball screens, and mistakes are happening, you can get upset, but who should you get upset at? You. Like, you got to turn that right back around on yourself. Now, at your level, you have a lot of time, and you have great players. Like, every level of college basketball has amazing players at it and great coaches. So you guys get deep into things, but at the high school level too, any mistakes on the floor that are happening, we better make sure, if we're getting upset about those, that they are things that we're allowed to hold them accountable for. Because I don't think that's just everything. Everything on the floor I'm going to hold you accountable for. Okay, that means you've practiced and worked on all of those things.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. I mean, if it's not something that we've been, on them about, then again, I only look at myself in those. And every coach should do this. You got to look at yourself first before you look at the team. Because if you're just getting mad at your team, you got to think about, what are you doing in these situations, and what are you trying to get across to them? What are they really gathering? How, you got to make sure you put the accountability on yourself first. I have a fun story on that stuff. So I did what I consider a no-no as a head coach, is trying to draw up a play out of a timeout that you've never done. And I remember this was last year. We're playing at University of Dallas, and we're down 4 with like a minute or so to go. And we're in a timeout, and we had 3 guys that were just playing phenomenal, right? And then one of our better players just wasn't having a good game. So I'm sitting there, I'm turning to my assistant, what do we have that has these 3 guys involved in some action, whatever? And we're like, we're blanking. The whole time I'm in a timeout, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. No. And I'm drawing something up, and I tell him what the reads are going to be as he comes off of it. And we break out of that timeout. I sit next to my assistant. I was like, that was really, really dumb. I shouldn't have done that. I put these guys in a bad spot. Don't ever do that. That's my fault. They go out, they execute it perfectly. Guy made a perfect pass, perfect read. We made the shot. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, okay, but never again. So they did this action like they had practiced it. I mean, that's again, the guys just had an understanding. I guess I explained it really well. I don't think so, but
Coach, first of all, man, I really appreciate you sharing that story, because when you started talking about that, I felt myself go, oh, thank you. Someone else has done that, not just me. But the difference in your story, though, is that it actually worked. I think most of the time when you try to do that, it doesn't work. And then you do just have to take full accountability in front of your team, which I feel like is a powerful moment, though. I don't think it's a bad thing for us to say, you know what, fellas, that's on me. Like, I missed the boat on that. The only problem is if that starts to happen multiple times, again and again, then you lose credibility, and you have to question then your competency in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure I even told the team after the game, like, 1, I was proud of them for executing, but 2, I was like, I should never put you guys in that position. It's like, but good job.
Yeah, but awesome job. Way to overcome. On that note of learning as a coach and maybe like self-evaluation, what are some things that you've done over the years to maybe recognize some of those blind spots that you have and grow and change? It could be with how you are in practice, how you handle things in games. What have you used?
Well, I mean, every year is, you get to the off season, it's time for reflection. How you felt like you did. I think it's important. One of the things I've learned is you gotta, my first 2 years as a head coach, we've done something different every year, and then we had injuries, and then it felt like I had to kind of go away from what we were trying to do. And I think that really cost us. And so that's one of those things where I'm looking at myself in that moment of, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you believe in? Stick to it. Don't give up. Don't just make a change for change's sake. Understand what you're trying to accomplish and stick to it. So that was a huge thing I've learned. A lot of that is just kind of my own self-evaluation. Some of that is listening to other coaches, reading books. And a lot of it too will also come from meetings with players, what they liked, what they didn't like, what could we have done better? Getting their perspective on some things, I think, is really important. But I think you just, with any profession, you got to constantly study up and look for areas to improve, and so there's a lot I've learned in the, first 2 years as a head coach. So I'd like to, as Coach Wacker used to say, you either win and enjoy it or you learn. And so I'm getting tired of learning.
I think I've learned a lot. I think it's good to go into each year with an area of growth, like a focus that you have. Like for me this year, it's while live gameplay is happening, controlling my nonverbal, my body. What am I trying to say?
Body language.
Body language, my body language. When I stand, when I sit, what I do with my hands, do I droop? Because if our goal offensively is to get the best shot as fast as possible, I didn't say anything about make the shot, but just take the best shot as fast as possible. That if we do that, I should act the same way, whether we make or miss. And I've seen myself over the years watching film that if we miss a shot that I feel like we should have made, even though it's right within what we're going for, if we miss it, I don't yell at them. I don't say, just make a shot or anything like that, but I go sit down. And I sit down kind of the same way, almost like in a dejected way. And I'm wondering if I realize that pattern, how often or how soon until my players realize that pattern. What's one, if you don't mind sharing, maybe what's one area of growth that you would really like to focus on this year?
Man, that body language is probably a good one. I try not to be too reactive.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you talk about body language because, we talk with our guys, what is your body language in the class? Are you sitting down like, arms crossed like this? Are you wearing a hat? What do you, how that goes with our approach and our values, like how you are looking and being in a certain area screams, it might not be true, but what is the interpretation? Body language is, a huge amount of communication. And so if you're looking disinterested in the class, well, professor's going to not think that you care, and so you want to, sometimes fake it, act like if, you just got to kind of practice those habits, but we're all like that. Just, it's natural. You're not, because it's unconscious. You're not thinking about it. But probably an area of growth for me would be not like I talked about, sticking to what we're doing. Not necessarily, I don't like the term giving up, but trying to change something for change's sake. Like you
got to be careful with those adjustments.
Yeah. I want to be more consistent in like, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And then go from there. Best thing, talk about learning. I was watching, I think Sean Miller was talking about this, and he talked about the 80-20 rule. 80% you're focused on the things that your non-negotiables, how you're going about doing things, what you're going to do. And then the 20% is adjustments, whether it be in-game adjustments or adjustments made through scout. And that really kind of stuck with me because I'm like, okay, I was probably 20-80, but I want to get, that's where I'm going out with this year is like, hey, we're going to stick with this. We're not, regardless of what's going on, we got to be consistent what we're doing. The other thing with, 2 years, and again, injuries really played a big part of this, but I can't say that I've really had consistent lineups. And I think that can really impact the players. I'm not thinking of it from that standpoint, or I wasn't, but I think it's very true. You've got to have that consistency. Otherwise you have different lineups going in every time. And again, some of that was injury related, but also some of it was this guy was just ticking me off this week because he didn't look good and this other guy looked good. So you make those changes. And I saw something with John Wooden that talked about that with, don't make change for change's sake. Have an idea of what your lineup's going to be, stick with them till the game's won or lost. And then as time goes on, then you can talk about, another player getting an opportunity if some of these guys haven't been producing, but can't promise those things. But it was really good for me to kind of read that stuff because those are, again, learning growth. As a head coach, I think those are big things for me.
I think small adjustments versus complete overhaul, that's a lesson that you have to learn as a coach, I think, through failure. Unless they can listen to this and they haven't gone through it yet, don't do what we've done. Like a parent kind of telling a kid. But I learned that years ago when I was at McKinney High School with Wes Watson as his varsity assistant. My first year with them, we had a really talented senior group, and we ran some Kansas ball screen motion, and it worked with that group. But dribble drive motion was coming on. Calipari's packet and Memphis was floating around. And so we were all looking at that. We had returning one dynamic guard that we thought in 4-out-1 and dribble drive could really start the wheel. And if you have a guy that can go from zero advantage and create something, and then you start those drags and you get some closeouts, dribble drive can work. And we were going to help them get to be better shooters. Well, through the summer of that year, that player got in trouble and was ineligible for his senior year. And we had spent all spring putting dribble drive in. Everything, I think there's a danger if you're doing everything because of one player. What if they get hurt? What if they're ineligible? What if whatever? But they leave, and then do you overhaul completely? Well, we lost this guy and we felt like we couldn't do it. So we went a complete different direction, more of a Bobby Knight style of motion, averaged 52 points a game and won 7 games. And the whole year, it was a struggle. And we felt, so here's what I kind of jotted this down. I think small adjustments keep confidence in what you're doing. Complete overhauls, I think, crush confidence. Because to the players, it's a sign of crap. He doesn't think we're good enough to do this anymore. And so over the years, even some teams that I don't feel like are capable of running and gunning the same, we can make some small adjustments, but we're going to be who we are. But I think you just have to go through failure like that to learn that lesson.
I think that goes to not just system structure. It goes with, I think, players that you're playing. That was a big thing for me, just this inconsistent lineups, that the chemistry is not there. And, for whatever reasons I was making those decisions, I feel like looking back on it, I think hurt us more than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember last year, I think this is towards Christmas break or something. Some of the guys that we were playing just weren't producing the way I wanted them to. I can't really recall like what my headspace was at that time, but I think I started the next game all freshmen. I was like, you know what? We're gonna try to send a mission. Those freshmen come out and get a nice little lead, and I turned to my assistant. I was like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
But
I'll send a message. The message is these dudes need to be playing and not those dudes.
Yeah, that was a huge thing I learned. And again, what I credit is the guys, mentality last year of they could have easily fell apart.
Yeah.
Just with how things were going, but they stayed with it. And we were in a lot of games, and, we made too many mistakes, but their mentality, coming the next day into practice, lifted me up, how they impacted you. And like, that was huge. So they gave me a lot of confidence that we have something special going on here. Now we just got to put it all together.
I think that's a great sales pitch, maybe for more of a positionless mentality with basketball, or at the very least to cross-train your players to have traditional point guards or shooting guards doing different things because of injury, because of sickness, all the things that will happen throughout a season. You may be down 2 or 3 of the guys that typically you have running the majority of your actions. And again, do you teach something new? All right, guys, we don't have these guys, so we're gonna do this. Or do you cross-train them, take your offensive identity, the things that you want to do, break them up into drills, and have everybody go through them, even your bigs go through initiating actions and doing things. Maybe you have a versatile big, and by drawing that defender out, changing up something, I've noticed that a lot of those bigs don't handle coverages well on the perimeter if their guy isn't the one screening. Like, they know what to do if that happens, but they don't know what to do if their guy is the one receiving those things. And so I think you can play around with that, but maybe it helps in those situations. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, we try to be as versatile as we possibly can. We want to take advantage of mismatches, whether it be on the perimeter or post, and whether it be guards posting up or bigs on the perimeter. It's all about what you got. I think you got to coach to what you got. But there's, again, just going back to the 80-20, this is how we're going to do things, and then you make the small adjustments as needed. But we try to get our guys doing a little bit of everything in terms of drill work and stuff. And two, and with breakdowns, if you're able to get them to kind of go through some of those actions, they have an understanding of what the action is occurring and what they should be looking for over time. It takes a lot of time to get to that, but I think it's huge, especially at the high school level. You get your bigs working on ball handling and reach from the perimeter. Number one, if they got a big on their team and that big's on the perimeter, it opens up the basket a lot more. There's no rim protection now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's huge. And then you work on guards posting up. When I was in high school, my coach had me doing a bunch of, he had the guards working on post up stuff, and I think that makes your game all around game better. I think you still got to stick with, I would say 80-20. 80% of the time you should be working on these things. Maybe 20% of the time you work on this other area so that you can slowly develop over time.
That's a really good word. And that's coming from a TABC player of the year back in the day.
Back in the day when I was a little bit, in shape.
Yeah, but that's a big deal, though. Player of the year, like, not many guys get that.
No, it was fun. Winning state helped, playing at a small high school, and we had a really, really good team. People don't know, but we actually went to the state semifinal in my junior year, but nobody knows that because at the time, 1A, we played our state semifinal kind of during the regional tournament. 1A only had a state championship game in 06. 07 was the first time they had it all at the Irwin Center. So it was fun. We had pretty good team. I think 3 or 4 of the guys from my high school team played in college. That's pretty unique for a 1A.
That's big time. You can win state doing that or having that on your team for sure. That helps. And then coming from a small school but having a lot of basketball success, what was that transition like going to then SFA?
Huge. We ran nothing but zone in high school, and I went to Stephen F. Austin and played for Coach Casper, who was one of the best half-court man-to-man defensive coaches around and wasn't exactly the best defender. So it was a learning curve for sure. And then also a lot of things you can do at a small school you can't really do against, talented players and, size and athleticism. So the first year was a huge adjustment, but, that's going to be every freshman at any level. And it took me a couple of years to kind of figure some things out, what were the teaching points, how I can get myself in a position and trying to be smarter to make up for my athleticism or lack thereof. And it takes time, development takes time, learning takes time. And so it was fun, but it was definitely a difference.
In high school, I could care less about the defensive end. It was all about offense for me. My skill work, the things that I valued, and my high school coach, Tommy Thomas, I think put up with me on that end of it because I was good enough offensively. And I think that happens a lot of high schools is because they can score and do so many things offensively, they're almost like a turn a blind eye to what they maybe lack. And I'm not saying that's good, but you're right. That next level, realizing that I can't do the same things, I had to become a great defender. Do you think as a high school player that obviously you want to be well-rounded, but focusing on the offensive side, becoming really skilled with the ball, and even if there are some deficiencies defensively, coaches like yourself, or at least the level of play and the athletes, will help these guys to become good defenders?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at what you're trying to value in the, say the recruiting process. Are you looking for a defensive player? Are you looking for length and athleticism? Every level is going to kind of be different. We tend to kind of probably look more on the offensive side as opposed to the defense because we feel like we can make the adjustment with the defense, with how we do things. So we want to find that IQ on the offensive side, and then hopefully we'll be able to work the defensive. Other programs might be more defensive and they'll work the offensive. I think it just depends on what you value.
But for all those high school coaches out there that are worried that they're not helping their players enough by making them just lockdown defenders all the time and we're focusing on the offensive side, this is just my experience, but great offensive player in high school, got me recruited to Baylor. At Baylor, realized at the Big 12 level, I'm not athletic enough and I'm not skilled enough to still do those same things I want to do. But then if you care enough, you're strong, you get in the weight room and you buy into that side. I don't think I took a charge in high school. I don't think I did. And in college, 2-year Mr. Hustle Award, which at the time I thought that was like the award you give to the kid that he doesn't really do. I got nothing else for him. Just give him Mr. Hustle. Now I'm proud of it. but I got that. And then, I mean, I was assigned to guard Kirk Heinrich, Kareem Rush, Andre Emmett, TJ Ford, like some of these elite players, not because there wasn't anybody else for me to guard. Coach was wanting me to do that. So I believe that that's the side of the ball that can be taught quicker and to almost anybody. I wouldn't change a thing though in like the ability to make shots, the ability to handle it, pass it, flow into multiple offensive systems. I just still see the value in spending a majority of the time on that. Just lost credibility with maybe half the listeners or the truly defensive-minded guys. If you come into Grapevine Faith right now, you just won't see a lot of that. You'll see a lot of shooting.
Yeah. No, I mean, offense, I mean, if you look at everyone that gets recruited, you know, you talk about offensive numbers, you know, very seldomly are you talking, unless you're like just a freak big that's getting blocks left and right and rebounds and stuff. But you're going to see guys get recruited for their offensive ability, I think, more often than the defensive ability. I think the defense just comes into the program that you have, you know. Like I feel like we probably recruited a good mixture of guys at Stephen F. that were probably more defensive, rounded, as opposed to offense. But there was guys that were recruited for their offensive ability. So it kind of depends on what you need and all that stuff. But in terms of high school, yeah, you want to develop the offense and you want that guy to be really good at something, you don't are great at something as opposed to being good at everything. Because if you have that kind of staple, this guy's just a great point guard. He makes the decisions. He has the poise, handles the ball well, makes passes. I think that's huge. If you get a guy that's 45% 3-point shooter, man, that's huge. So they're going to get recruited for something that they're really, really great at. And then, if you're kind of all around, I think it's a little harder to kind of gauge, what level someone's going to be at.
The JAMODI podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
I love getting to ask this question because I've gotten so many different responses over the years. What's a rule change you would like to see and why?
Well, for the men's side, I always kind of get annoyed with this. For some reason in college, we like to think women's basketball and men's basketball is different. It's the same sport. So but the women's in college, they play quarters, the fifth foul of the quarter goes to double bonus. And then at, whatever last 2 minutes or minute, they can advance the ball on a timeout. Men were still, 20-minute halves, 1-and-1, stuff like that. I don't care if we go quarters necessarily, but I would like to have the ability to advance the ball at the end of the game with a timeout. I think that's huge. I think just from a strategic standpoint, there's a lot more you can do with that. It's more in line with the NBA. The only thing I will say I don't want to change is I don't want to get rid of 1-and-1s. I love 1-and-1s. I think there's more pressure, and you got to make, shots at the end of the game. Again, it comes with strategy. But I would say I would like to be able to see if we could advance the ball up the court, at the end of the game. I think that's a good one.
I think advance the ball is huge because think of what does a 2 to 3 second time left on the clock mean full court versus half court? Huge difference. And you could actually run real stuff and take a bounce, maybe two, quick in the half court. Yeah. I like the idea. Of advancing the ball. Why do you think the men's game is still at 2 halves and not at 4 quarters?
One, I think is to kind of just be different. And then I think it's also just traditional, what people think of with college basketball. I like the 2 halves, 20 minutes. I don't have any problem with that. I don't see the need to go to quarters. But
reset rule's nice, though, for the fouls. We went to that in the high school level where we're 5 and reset to 0. That was really a nice change.
Yeah, I know they're always, flirting with different rules and different things. They we think one year they talked about 6 fouls per person before you foul out. I'm like, heck yeah, that would be great.
Who is it? Jamin Copeland at Ava Marie said nobody fouls out. Individually, you can continue to rack up personal fouls, Now, the team fouls still stand, so it's not like you don't care about fouling anymore. But he said it's the only sport where the best players can be taken out of the game, because and besides maybe like a red card or targeting or something. But I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you want to get the other team's best player out.
That's true. It would change some things, yeah.
I don't know how,
But for the product of the game, the best players, maybe especially in the NBA, the best players just getting to stay on the floor. Like, unless they're tired, we're not taking these dudes out. It's the product. I get that for college and in high school, though. More strategic there for sure. Coach, the speed round. These are going to be quick questions. The first thing that pops in your head, go ahead and blurt it out. You look ready. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Greatest shooter of all time?
Oh, God. Larry Bird.
Good one. Favorite superhero?
Captain America.
Top 3 dinner guests that you like to have across any time period?
These aren't speed rounds. These got me thinking too much. Jesus, can't not have Jesus in there. We'll throw my wife to get some bonus points in there. So my wife.
Oh, it's a good one. I've never had that before. Wise man right there.
Yeah. And dinner, Jesus got to be paying for it. So it's going to be good.
He can make it. He can make it. Yeah.
Third person, and I'm a history buff, so I'm trying to go through like which historical person would be someone I'd want to. Yeah, I'm blanking on all this, so I'm just gonna say, let's make it entertaining. Let's go with Johnny Cash.
All right, that's a good one. Yeah, Johnny Cash. Best basketball movie of all time?
Got to be Hoosiers.
Texting or talking?
Talking.
For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Shot clock.
Thank you. Favorite holiday?
Christmas. Although I think my kids, it's Halloween because they get all the candy.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely, I wonder if Halloween is just for the kids more enjoy, like that's their choice because of the candy. And I don't as an adult, I don't really enjoy it that much anymore. And maybe it's because my wife and I are kind of homebodies and I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not into the whole spooky stuff, but just that time of year is nice because, like, from a coaching's perspective, you're getting ready for the season and fall weather. Well, in Texas, it is what it is, but
still 80s. Okay, up 3 on defense with 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Foul.
Yeah. Always been foul or gotten there?
So working with Coach Wacker over the years, that was just one of his things. Just that's what we were going to do, and just kind of stayed ingrained because it just inevitably you just see it happen, and you don't foul and they make the 3. I see that more often than fouling and then you lose the game. I would say the percentage is way on fouling, but I've watched a lot of great coaches, a lot of great programs where I'm like, foul, why aren't they fouling? But I would say foul. But you gotta teach it how to do it. We've been in that situation where it hasn't gone well.
Yeah. Yep. What book would you give someone?
I actually been reading. I'm not a big reader of books, but I've gotten into it lately. But I was given this one book called Teammates Matter by
Alan Williams.
Yes. And I got that book from our volleyball coach, and I was reading it, and man, I think I finished it in a day. I was just so immersed with it, and it was a phenomenal read. I loved his stories and just his journey, and I think I related it to myself a lot. Like, it was kind of just speaking to me. It's like, man, this is sounds like my journey almost. And so that would be the one I'd probably give to somebody. It was like, hey, this was fun to read.
Coach, that's awesome. I love his original book was called The Walk-On, Life at the End of the Bench. And I read that version years ago when I had first started high school coaching. And it was actually like you. When I read it, I thought, man, I was on scholarship, but our journeys were very similar. Like feeling like you're just trying to survive every year and what that feels like. And so it made me start to look at my story of the leftovers and then the whole college scandal part. Like, I really hadn't gone into it much after I graduated and started going back through that. But his book was my motivation for starting to put, the leftover story together. And then years later at McKinney, where you get all in our mailboxes in the teacher's room, there's books in all of our lockers, and I pull it out, it says Teammate Matters. And I'm like, oh, Alan Williams, interesting. I started leafing through. I was like, this is the walk-on. Yeah, but they rebranded it and there's probably some differences for sure. But that's cool. I haven't heard of that book in a long time. But anybody just a basketball junkie that likes those types of books and stuff, but then now, especially with the focus with the team, that's a great book.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it almost I felt like I was reading my own story with that one, and very similar. Like, you're having to, earn the respect of everyone every single year, and you're always going to be the walk-on. And I remember my junior year, I think they were doing like a story on kind of every player through the local newspaper, and so the guy interviewed me and asked me questions, and it was, the title was The Walk-On in terms of how it was written in the paper. And it talked about how I had, above average athleticism, in the league. And one of the things it talked about, like one of my proudest moments as a player, my biggest dream was playing in March Madness. That's what I wanted. Had an opportunity there, and we had good teams, and we got it. And so I talked about how one of the greatest blessings of my life was 38.4 seconds. And, in the paper, it talked about, that might be like chump minutes for some and all this stuff. I'm like, don't lessen it. Like, this is huge for me. 38.4 seconds. I had on that, and man, that I couldn't ask for more, So I remember being on the plane ride back, and, at that time I felt like I had accomplished a lot of, my major goal. And so all right, what now? So I wrote it down on a napkin on the plane, and kind of like as a prayer. I was like, God, let's see if I can do this. I want to, average 10 minutes a game next year. And by God, I averaged about 10 minutes a game my junior year. And I should have asked to be a starter.
Why did I shoot so low?
Exactly. So it was
good, man.
Just fun, but I enjoyed that book thoroughly.
Yeah. Favorite place to travel?
Well, with family now, we haven't got to get out too much, but we go down to the beach, Fort A area, quite a bit. But just personally, Atlanta is one of my favorite cities. Love the Braves. I like the Coca-Cola Museum. So that's probably my favorite spot.
All right, last one, probably most important. In basketball, who is the GOAT?
Michael Jordan. Yeah. I can't just... LeBron's got a lot of really good numbers, and he's phenomenal in his own. I think it's hard. I feel like you got to go decade by decade of who the GOAT is, as opposed to just one overall, legendary player. So I would just say it's Michael Jordan in my book, and nobody will change that.
Coach, this was so much fun, man. I really enjoyed getting to learn more about you, and especially the culture that you guys have. Love the idea of the game of life lessons, and then the way that you focus on attitude and approach. Just got a lot out of this, and really, really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. I love these. And when you talk hoops, you talk life, it's fun. So I appreciate you having me on.
If anybody had any questions, maybe about wanting to start their own, game of life lessons with their team, or anything else, we typically, I don't get into too much of like on-court X's and O's stuff. Everybody has good stuff, but that's pretty easy to find. It's this stuff to me that maybe is a little bit more interesting personally. But if they wanted to learn more, what's a good way for them to contact you?
Yeah, I'll give you my cell phone. That's a good one. Shoot me a text, who you are, and be happy to get on a phone call. And then the other way is just my email, afalke@tlu.edu. Best way to do it. But it's been huge, and it's one of my favorite things that we do with our guys, the game of life lessons. It's fun because you take your mind off the game for a little bit, and you think about things that matter, and you try to put things in perspective a little bit more, because winning is hard. Winning is hard. Doesn't matter the level you're at. It's always going to be tough. You're always striving to do it, and you always want to expect to win. But at the end of the day, when the game's over, there's a million other things in life going on. So put things in perspective, continue to work hard, and at the end, the results will speak for themselves.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible. Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.